The Dryad Chronicles, Book 1, The Death of a Sacred Tree. Written by Kevin W. Carr. Read for you by 𝓓𝓻𝓂𝓭. For My Mother. Chapter 1. Going Home. The roads in Kentucky are rarely straight. They meander through hills and dales, skirting mountains and following rivers. As I looked out the bus window, I was once again smitten by the beauty of this place. Cool autumn air blew through trees that seemed ablaze with gold and red leaves. The slow-moving waters of the river lazily make their way towards the sea. Unlike the hustle and bustle of LA, it always feels like nothing is in a hurry in this place. In California, everything from the roads to the cities are laid out by design. There is a reasoning and purpose in every line and curve, from the farmers' fields to the towering architecture of downtown. As I saw a dilapidated barn sitting in a field, the contrast between this place and LA was not lost upon me. Somewhere, there is an owner of that land who just decided to let that barn decay until nature reclaimed it. The people in this part of the country seem to live life on its terms and not attach much significance to things they consider trivial, which are most things. Even the roads are casually laid out, as if someone just decided to go in a particular direction and happened to build a road behind them. There are few highways running the entirety of Kentucky as the I-5 does in California. Instead, smaller highways link to one another, forming a latticework of roads that spans the state. Of all the roads in Kentucky, this one is the most significant, because this road is taking me home after far too long. Going home always fills me with a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety. It hardly ever lives up to one's expectations because something is always different. Sometimes it is the place or the people that have changed, but most of the time, it is us. With this realization comes the sad truth that we can never truly rekindle childhood memories and relive a moment that has already been lived. However, we can always create new memories and find new moments. So, perhaps it is better to shake off the nostalgia of the past to appreciate the experience of the present. "So, where are you going, girl?" the elderly lady in the seat next to me asks, pulling me from my thoughts. "I'm going to Eden," I replied, and watched her head tilt slightly as if trying to recall something. "I don't believe I ever heard of it," she admitted. "I'm not surprised. It is pretty small. It has a population of about 4,000, if you count the dogs and cats," I informed her. My description seemed to amuse her and caused her to laugh. "Oh, I always count the dogs and the cats," she countered as she rummaged in her oversized purse for something. Upon finding her wallet, she pulled out a tattered photograph of a scruffy little terrier. "That's my baby there," she said while handing me the photo. "It's adorable," I assured her, while taking what I felt was an appropriate amount of time to examine the photo before handing it back. "I think animals give us fulfillment in our lives. Don't you agree?" she asked as she tucked the photo away. "Absolutely," I told her with an enthusiastic nod. I felt a tinge of shame for lying to the older woman, but she put me on the spot. The truth is that I was never good with animals. My mom bought me a parakeet in a small cage once. I placed it high up on the hutch in the living room so that I could look out the windows. Unfortunately, my mother found its remains a month later. I didn't mean it harm, I just forgot about it, as kids often do. Since then, I have always viewed pets as a responsibility I never wanted. After all, I am only 29 and have barely figured out how to be responsible for myself. "My name is Margaret," she said while offering me her hand. I'm Charlie. I mean, Charlene, I said, quickly correcting myself while shaking her hand. Are you sure? Margaret asked with a grin. Because you seem as if you're not sure what your name is. I hope this is not one of those amnesia things like you see in the soap operas. Now it was my turn to laugh. No, it's just I was always called Charlene here. However, back in California, everyone just calls me Charlie, I explained. It is a pleasure to meet you, Charlie, Margaret declared, with a perfunctory shake of the hands. As it is to meet you, Margaret, I returned with a heartfelt smile. So, what is Eden to you? Margaret queried. It's the place where I was born, and it is where my mother and brother live, I explained. I knew why my mom was still in Eden, but I always wondered why my brother stayed there. When we were kids, all we would ever talk about was getting out of that stagnant little town. Oh, so you're going home. Good for you, Margaret said, and gave me a pat on my knee. I hardly think of it as home anymore. I haven't been there in 10 years, I declared. The truth was, I didn't think of it as home when I lived there. Home is where your family is, Margaret said matter-of-factly. I suppose, I conceded. Margaret and I talked about the trivial things in life until the conversation waned and Margaret nodded off. Then, feeling the weight of the silence, I once again turned to stare out the window. The bus started traveling away from the river and entered an area where dense woods bordered both sides of the road. The branches of trees on both sides stretched out over the road as if reaching for each other. The placement of the trees gave one the impression of being in a tunnel that had an autumn-colored canopy forming a mosaic backlit by the sunlight. The midday sun sent rays of light beaming through the foliage that danced upon the vehicles in the other lane. When the forest canopy blocked out the sunlight, I could see my reflection in the window. The face staring back at me seemed a vestige of the past. Before I came on this trip, I had dyed my hair its natural chestnut brown and removed my nose ring. I don't know why we change ourselves so much for others. One would hope that the people that loved us would accept whoever we are, but there is always doubt and uncertainty in oneself. The problem is compounded when the people you love are from a place where nothing ever changes. The dense forest opened up to a clearing devoid of life. An expanse of dirt led to a stone mountain that had been sheared flat on its front. 2 half-domed mine shafts were carved into the face of the mountain. A conveyor protruded from one of the shafts to carry coal from the mine to a crusher, which broke it up and deposited it into piles. To me, the coal mine always looked like a scene from a dark corner of hell. Years of debris had blackened the ground, spreading its darkness to all those who tread upon it. Tired miners emerged from the black void, covered with coal dust and sweat, looking as if they had done battle with the darkness of the mine, while fresh miners clocked in at a ramshackle building with an off-white sign that reads, Eden Mining Company. At one time, the mine, like the town of Eden, was prosperous, but then the coal beds diminished and produced less coal every year. Nowadays, the mine generates enough to keep the dying town alive, but not enough to let it thrive. Everyone hopes that they will find richer coal beds deeper in the mine, but to me, hope is the currency of the desperate. The coal mine marked the outskirts of Eden. Soon the trees gave way to a randomly spaced mixture of houses in various states of disrepair. Because Eden was settled gradually, there was no continuity in the style or structure of houses. Because of this, an old plantation-style home with a columned veranda would be neighbored by a plank cabin with a rust-streaked aluminum roof. The only commonality between most houses was the American flags hanging off most porches. Looking upon Eden was like gazing at the stillborn remnants of the American dream. I imagined the town at one time when it was shiny and new, filled with people who hoped for a better future. Now the town is weathered and tarnished, only holding the ghost of those dreams of prosperity. What the citizens of Eden called downtown consisted of one long brick building that housed the hardware store, market, and a feed store. The frontage of the block-long building was set at different heights to give each shop the appearance of individuality. The shops furthered this illusion by painting their storefronts differently. On the side of the red-bricked building was a faded mural of a miner's bust with the words, "Welcome to Eden." The mural must have been as old as the town itself, judging by its condition. The eyes of the miner had long since lost their luster and now seemed sad, and his face had faded to such a point that his smile was no longer visible. To me, the washed-out miner had never smiled, but I knew the smile was there because my mother told me she saw it when she was a child. The bus pulled up to its designated stop at the front of the building. I felt terrible about having to wake up Margaret as I squeezed by her and retrieved my duffel from the overhead rack. I was not surprised that I was the only one getting off, but I was a little taken aback by the anticipation that welled up within me. The excitement grew exponentially when I saw my brother Tommy waiting by the Greyhound sign. Like me, Tommy was most comfortable in old jeans and simple shirts, so I was not surprised to see him wearing faded blue jeans and a flannel shirt. What was surprising was the mustache that Tommy had grown. As soon as I exited the bus, I dropped my bag and ran into Tommy's awaiting arms. We hugged each other so tightly that it was as if one of us might disappear if we let go. Tommy had turned 27 last month, but no matter how old he got, he would always be my little brother, and I loved him dearly. After the long hug, I stepped back to appraise how Tommy had changed since I last saw him, while holding his face in my hand. "Is that a caterpillar on your lip, or are you growing a mustache?" I jested.
Well, it's not as pronounced as some of your Hollywood types, like Tom Selleck, but it's a start. What about you? I thought all you Californians wore sunglasses all the time.
Tommy teased back. We both laughed and hugged again, and then I saw it. "Oh my God, is that Dad's old truck?" I exclaimed upon noticing the faded powder blue 1965 Chevy truck parked next to the market. The last time I had seen the truck, it had been sitting on blocks with no tires and had vines growing on its grill.
Heck yeah, I fixed it up,
Tommy said proudly while walking me to it. The truck was mottled with patches of rust where the paint had worn away, and the front window had a long crack snaking its way up the center of the windshield. In addition, parts of the fender had corroded away, exposing the mismatched tires. "You're being awful liberal with the term 'fixed up'," I informed Tommy while we walked to the truck.
Well, like the mustache, it's a work in progress,
Tommy admitted as he struggled for a moment to open the passenger's door for me. I threw my duffel bag in the back and hopped into the cab. I was amazed to find that the inside of the truck had been fully restored. I ran my fingers over the chrome Chevy lettering on the glove box, and it brought back memories of riding around with my dad when I was a little girl. He would tell me that he saw some coyotes, and I would stick my head out the window and howl at them as the wind whipped my hair. I quickly rubbed my eyes to hide the fact that I had shed a tear. Thinking about my dad was hard because he was such a wonderful person, and he died of a heart attack when we were so young. "You did an amazing job on this," I told Tommy while putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder and sharing a meaningful look. "Now, if only it would start," I finished, sounding doubtful.
"Oh, ye of little faith,"
Tommy laughed and turned the key. The engine turned over right away and settled into a steady rumble. I gave him a thumbs up, and we set off. As expected, the town of Eden hadn't changed since I had been gone. Then, to my surprise, I saw a new building that stuck out compared to the surrounding structures. Are you serious? They built another church, I said while appraising the bright white steepled building. The sign in front proclaimed it the First Baptist Church.
Yeah, apparently we were short on God. Living in California for so long, I expect you have gone total heathen by now,
Tommy observed and flashed me a smile. How can a town this size have 5 churches and not a single Walmart? I wondered out loud while turning to him.
I guess here in the South we have different priorities,
Tommy said with a shrug.
Are you an atheist now?
No, I still believe in God, I said, feeling a little irked at his implication. I just don't think he needs 5 churches when some people in these parts don't even have a house, I finished.
They do overdo it a bit down here,
Tommy admitted. Is Mom still taking you to church now that you're all grown up? I asked, feeling a little curious if that tradition continued.
Hell yes, front and center every Sunday,
Tommy told me with a bit of a chuckle. Church is where all the hotties are anyways. Just look for the girl who always goes to the bathroom, because you can be damn sure someone dragged them there, I informed him. I had spent many a Sunday in that bathroom in my youth, and it felt nice to share my insights.
I will have you know that I met the woman I am going to marry, and it wasn't in church,
Tommy said, while grinning from ear to ear. You dog, I declared, while lightly punching him in the arm.
Her name is Serafina, and I'm going to pop the question tonight,
Tommy told me as he turned down the road that would eventually lead home. Does she live in town? I inquired.
Do you remember that old apartment complex with the courtyard?
Tommy asked me. When I nodded, Tommy continued.
Well, they're going to tear it down, and she is going to need another place to live. So I'm going to ask her to move in with me and Mom,
Tommy explained, before adding that I shouldn't tell Mom yet because she didn't know. That's amazing! I am so happy for you, I congratulated him. I knew we were close to home now because we were passing McGreedy's farm, which was only a mile away. As I stared out into the green pastures, memories came flooding back to me. Oh my God! Do you remember when we broke into Mr. McGreedy's barn, and when he came in we hid in the rafters, and you got so scared that you peed yourself? I asked, while reliving the memory in my mind. I don't know why I said that last part. It was kind of a dick thing to say, but I just got caught up in the past and it came out. I could tell that he was a little upset, but before I could apologize, Tommy spoke.
If you want to talk about bodily functions, I seem to remember you pissing your bed quite a bit when we were kids,
Tommy countered pointedly. Fair enough, I acknowledged, and then continued. However, look at it this way. If we weren't so good at peeing ourselves, we would have never learned how to do laundry by age 12. This got both of us laughing, especially when recalling our mom wondering why the washer was running at midnight. Our house sat on an acre of land, which was mainly unkempt except for the front yard. Our house was not the fanciest in Eden, or the biggest, but to me, it was the best. Like many houses, it had a raised foundation that left a crawl space under the house that was perfect for adventures and hide-and-seek. The house's layout was pretty much a large square, except for the area where the living room protruded with windows on all sides. Even though it was a single-story house, you could tell it had an upstairs loft because of the large window set in the gable above the porch. That was my window, and I had spent so much of my life staring out of it, dreaming of elsewhere. Wooden stairs led up to the wide porch, where I was happy to see my mother sitting in a rocking chair, waiting for us. My mother is a stout woman with delicate features and sandy gray hair that shows her age. She was never one to dye her hair or layer on makeup to hide how old she was. To my mother, Gray hair was a mantle of wisdom that was bestowed on her by the Lord. My mother started hurriedly making her way down the walkway as soon as she saw us pulling up. As soon as I got out of the truck, I was enveloped in my mother's arms and nestled in the bosom of her floral dress. "My girl has returned. God has delivered you to me," my mother declared as she kissed my forehead. Her embrace was tight, but I surrendered to it because it felt good to be so loved. "Actually, Greyhound has delivered me to you," I corrected my mother as she eventually released me. "Praise the Lord. My smart-mouthed daughter has returned," my mother affirmed with her face aglow with happiness. Tommy grabbed my bag as Mom and I walked with arms linked towards the house. Other than some chipped paint and a little more weathering, it looked just as I remembered it. "Did you take a bus the whole way?" my mother asked me. "No, I flew into Louisville and took a bus the rest of the way," I informed her. "I have never liked flying," my mother declared while patting my hand, which she had been holding on to since we left the truck. I had never been aware of my mother ever leaving Eden and wondered where she developed her aversion to flying. I pondered where she could have gone. Upon entering the house, my senses came alive. The aroma of southern food and baked goods wafted through the air. I walked, trance-like, to the kitchen, where the smells emanated from. Before me, a feast was laid out, the likes of which I hadn't seen since leaving home. A meaty pot of burgoo was placed in the center of the table, and next to it was a colorful heirloom tomato pie. The sides included low country rice, freshly baked spoon bread, and a peach cobbler for dessert. My mouth was already watering before I even sat down. This was the only place that someone could get this type of food, and I hadn't realized how much I missed it. "Have you already eaten anything today?" my mother asked as she started serving everyone. She was probably gauging how much food she could get me to eat. My mother had always said I was too skinny, but today I was looking forward to her trying to fatten me up. "I had some McDonald's at the airport," I informed my mother and noticed her shake her head in disapproval. "Damn, I would kill for a Big Mac," Tommy said. "You watch your mouth, Tommy Baxter, and don't blaspheme your mother's food by coveting junk," Mom admonished him. I snorted a little as I tried to stifle a laugh at him being rebuked. Tommy rolled his eyes at me, but said nothing back to Mother. Once Mom sat down, I gathered a spoonful of food and prepared to dig in. My spoon only made it halfway to my mouth before I was halted. "Charlene, I don't know how they do things in California, but here we say grace before we eat," my mother corrected me, and I set my spoon down. Across the table, my brother was wearing a satisfied smirk as he sat there enjoying my little faux pas. I scrunched my nose up and shook my head, showing my displeasure at his gloating, when Mother closed her eyes and began to pray. "Dear Lord, thank you for the food you have put before us, and thank you for bringing our family together so that we may love one another. Would anyone like to add anything?" my mother finished while looking up at me. "Also, bless the hands that made the food, being how she did most of the work. Amen," I added and picked up my spoon. "One of these days, that mouth of yours is gonna get you in trouble with God," my mother warned me. "I don't think so, because if we're all made in his image, then I have to believe that he has a sense of humor," I told my mother in between bites. "Oh, yeah, I bet he finds you hilarious," Tommy joked. "Enough of that. I want to hear all about your life since leaving," Mother said, shifting the focus on me. I told my mother about going to college to be an architect and how my teacher thinks I have natural talent. I described all the fantastic buildings in Los Angeles, like the Getty Museum and the Walt Disney Concert Hall. When the topic came around to relationships, I told my mother that I was far too busy for such things. The truth was more complicated. I had the occasional sexual encounter in college, and I was always game for a good party. However, I had never had a deep and meaningful relationship with any of the men I dated. It seemed to be that in relationships with men, it always became all about them at some point. At this point in my life, I wanted to focus on myself. I didn't think my mother could survive stories about hooking up at raves, so I steered the talk away from relationships altogether. Oh, and in California, everyone just calls me Charlie, I finished. Nonsense. That's a boy's name. You are named after your great-aunt Charlene, who fled the war with your great-grandmother so that you could be here, my mother said while gathering the dishes, effectively putting an end to any debate about my name. I decided that this was not a hill worth dying on, so I just nodded. I was going to offer to help do the dishes, but then Tommy chimed in. I'm going to help Charlie get settled in, Tommy explained as he excused himself from the table. I knew that Tommy was probably just trying to get out of helping, but I didn't care. All the food I ate made me feel lethargic, and I was close to going into a food-induced coma. What have I done to be blessed with two smart-mouthed children? Mother asked rhetorically as we exited the kitchen. Tommy carried my bag upstairs to the attic loft. The room was dark, and I could see the night had fallen outside. The loft's large window framed a starry scene with a bright full moon hanging in the night sky. When I flicked on the light, I stood in wonderment at the condition of the room. Nothing had changed a single iota since I left. I had expected to find things boxed up and covered in dust, but instead it was like walking into the past. It warmed my heart to think of my mother keeping it as if it were a shrine to me. I can't believe it's all the same, I professed my amazement while picking up a troll doll I bought at a yard sale when I was 12. Yeah, Eden's like a time warp where nothing ever changes, Tommy observed as he set my duffel bag down. My eyes darted to one familiar thing after another as I sat on the bed. So, tell me about Serafina, I asked Tommy as I motioned for him to sit next to me. Oh man, she is the most amazing woman and is so beautiful, Tommy said excitedly as he sat beside me. What does she do for a living? I inquired. I don't think she does anything. She never leaves the apartment complex, and she doesn't have any electronics, Tommy told me. Not even a television or phone? I asked, wondering who could live without such things in this day and age. Nope, Tommy confirmed to my surprise. Then what do you guys do? I asked curiously. We just spend time together, Tommy said, a little sheepishly, which got me thinking. Have you had sex with her? I blatantly asked with a grin. No, Tommy said, a little too emphatically, but I could tell by his blushing and the knowing smile that he was lying. Dear Lord, my brother is an adulterer, I laughed. I need to tell Mom so she can pray for your soul, I then proclaimed as I got up. The look on Tommy's face was priceless as I headed towards the door. He blocked my way, and we wrestled around a bit before Tommy realized I was messing with him by my uncontrollable laughter. You are not a nice person, my brother accused as we resumed our seats. Huh, you know I got your back, bro, I reassured Tommy, and then asked, when am I going to meet this girl? I was supposed to meet her hours ago, so I need to go, but you will meet her real soon, Tommy said while looking at the moon anxiously. Try not to have too much fun, I told him as he headed towards the door. Before Tommy left, he stopped in the doorway and turned to me. It's nice to have you back, sis, Tommy said, while looking at me so sincerely that I knew he meant it. Then he left, and I was alone, surrounded by my past. I usually have problems sleeping in a strange place, but this wasn't someplace new to me, so soon I drifted off. In the middle of the night, I woke up for some reason and saw Tommy standing over my bed, looking down at me. "What?" I muttered groggily, while still half in a dream. Tommy just stood there, silently. The moonlight dimly lit his face, revealing haunted features that seemed off, somehow. Something in Tommy's eyes looked wrong, as if he wasn't there. I mentally prepared myself to get up, but he just walked away before I could. I began to wonder if it was all a dream, and I drifted back to sleep. This has been an excerpt of The Death of a Sacred Tree, Book 1 of the Dryad Chronicles, written by Kevin W. Carr, narrated by 𝓓𝓻𝓂𝓭. Copyright 2022 by Kevin W. Carr. Production copyright 2022 by Kevin W. Carr.